Hello, this is Tom Davis and welcome to part 7 of the Davis Family History video series. This video will take us from Greek Street in Dublin on to England and then on to India and Singapore and finally to Burma and some of the worst horrors of the Second World War. Thomas Davis, born 1877, was the firstborn child of Thomas Davis and Bridget Lockheed. Thomas married Emily Lally in 1910 and they had 8 children, all born in Dublin. However, their firstborn child, Thomas Patrick Davis, born 1911, tragically died at the age of 11 months. Their fourth child, George Davis, was born on the 20th of January 1918 at 2 Greek Street, Dublin, into a poor working-class family which was to experience even more tragic events. Between 1929 and 1935, George Davis was to lose 3 of his brothers and 1 sister. His brother James Davis died in 1929, aged 7 years. His sister Margaret Bridget Davis in 1931, aged 1 year. His brother Anthony Davis, also in 1931, aged 18 years, and his brother John Joseph Davis in 1935, aged 20 years. George was only 17 years old in 1935, and it must have seemed to him that his future in Dublin was very dim indeed. Perhaps for that very reason, he decided to move to England in search of a better life. George moved to England sometime between 1936 and 1939. We find him working in a steel foundry in Dunstable in the 1939 register. He is living at 24 Garden Street, Dunstable, and is most likely working for Bagshaw and Company, a short distance away on Church Street, Dunstable. However, England and the world were about to head into some very dark times, with war being declared on Germany on the 1st of September 1939 and a general mobilisation order being issued on the 1st of October 1939. Like many others, George enlisted in the British Army on the 15th of January 1940 and after basic training was posted to the 155th Field Royal Artillery Regiment. However, during his time in Dunstable, George had met his future wife, and he married Emily Findlay in St Albans on the 11th of May 1940 in the parish church of St Alban and Stephen on Beaconsfield Road, St Albans. In March 1941, the 155th left the port of Gourock on board the SS Strathmore, bound for India. They arrived in India in May 1941 and joined the 9th Indian Division on the 5th of May 1941 and were equipped with 25-pounder artillery guns. In August 1941, the 155th moved from Kirki, India to Malaya with the division, and in September it re-equipped with 4.5-inch howitzer guns. It was then transferred to the 11th Indian Division on the 1st of October 1941. The 155th Field Royal Artillery were moved to the northwest of Malaya in the middle of a dense rubber plantation. For some time the Japanese had adopted a threatening approach to their neighbours in the Far East and had set their eyes on Malaya with its rich mineral resources. Despite this, little meaningful attention had been given by the British High Command to provide adequate military protection for the country. With Britain fully stretched in Europe and the Middle East, Malaya was not top of the priorities. The Japanese soon spotted the military advantage, and on the 8th of December 1941 they landed an invasion force at Kota Bharu on the northeast coast of Malaya, and at the same time made a strike through Thailand. The 155th Royal Artillery were very quickly engaging the Japanese in battle, and fierce fighting broke out along the front line. In the military action which followed, there was high praise for the performance of the 155th. However, despite their bravery and determination, the Allied troops were hopelessly outgunned by the Japanese. The Allied troops had little or no protection from the Japanese dive bombers, as the outdated planes of the RAF, including lumbering Brewster Buffaloes, were quickly shot from the skies by the powerful Zero fighter planes of the Japanese. The Japanese had also arrived with hundreds of tanks, whereas the Allied forces had not one single tank with which to face them. The battle turned into a fighting withdrawal, and by February the Allied troops had fallen back onto Singapore Island, holding a defensive position on the Woodlands estate east of the causeway from the mainland. By this time the military position for the Allied forces was impossible, and with little hope of a relief force arriving in time, the decision was taken on the 15th of February to order the Allied troops to surrender. And so the men of the 155th and many thousands of other British and Commonwealth troops surrendered to the Japanese. In all, over 50,000 Allied troops were taken prisoner. They were initially housed in their own barracks on Singapore Island called Changi until October 1942, when groups of Allied POWs began to be shipped out to other locations. The POWs were transported to different locations in the Far East by ship and train. Some were shipped to Formosa, now called Taiwan, where they slaved in the hellhole of the notorious Kinkaseki copper mine, while others were sent by train to the infamous Burma Thai railway camps, where they would work as slave labour, only to suffer and die in horrendous conditions. But there is a lot more to George Davis's story, and that will be told in part 2 of this video, which I'll make available shortly. Thank you for watching. Slán leat.